Well, hey folks, I'm Josh. Welcome back to the shop. Today, we're going to clean a Swiss Army knife. So this is a knife that I picked up used and it was rather reasonable, probably because it is very dirty. So I thought I would make a video of how I clean a Swiss Army knife. This is not going to be super intensive. All I really have here is a bowl of warm, not super hot water, like I can put my hand in it and it's not scalding me or anything. Water and my Swiss Army knife and another Swiss Army knife, a brush, towel, and then you need some kind of lubricant, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. I happen to have some mineral oil here. Mineral oil. So the first thing I want to do is I want to remove the scales on this knife, and these are pretty beat up, but I still want to use them again, I think. So I got to take off the accessory tools. I'm just going to drop that in the water, and then I got to take this off. But I want to soften them up a little bit so that when I take them off, hopefully they don't chip or break too bad or anything. So I'm just going to drop them in the warm water and let the warm water soften that plastic a little before I go to pop it off. So we're going to put her in the water here and let her soak for just a minute. I'm also, while that is soaking, going to go grab some Dawn dish soap just because I think this one's dirty enough that I want a little bit of soap, but not a ton. So I will be right back as that warms up. I'm going to pop these scales off because they feel pretty good and warm. So we're going to see if they will come off of there easy. So all I'm using for this is just the can opener of another knife. And man, that's on there pretty good. There we go. Not too bad. That's a nice looking scale. Solid. Anyway, this knife happens to be I think you call it a Champion Plus. It's just like the Swiss Champ, but it does not have the plier. It doesn't have the pliers on it. There we go. Now, if you go to the Swiss Army Knife website and you read what it says to do to clean a knife, all it tells you to do is take your knife, put it in warm water, and then open and close the tools in the water. And that's supposed to be all you have to do, and then re-lubricate, which I don't know how well that's going to work by itself. This one's pretty dirty. Ooh, also has a damaged blade. That's probably the other reason it was cheap. So I'm gonna kind of get it open. And I'm obviously going to have to clean these tools up a little bit, but I'll do that probably more later. I just really want to get inside the knife here clean, and then I'll get it lubricated and dry, or dry and then lubricated. So be careful when you're doing this. You don't want to obviously cut yourself on one of the knives. There we go. Now my bowl is not big enough, but that's okay. I can still do what I want to do. So I'm going to take, this is just our soap dispenser from the kitchen. And I'm going to take a little drop of Dawn dish soap here. And that's probably all the soap I'm going to use in this whole thing. I don't really want to get a bunch of suds, and I don't want to introduce a ton of soap here, but I do want to get a little bit in there to help clean things up. This one's pretty grungy. I think if your knife is not this bad, you probably don't need the soap, because you're just going to end up taking off lubrication that you actually wanted. So I would really only use the soap if you feel like your knife is in pretty bad shape. But I feel like this one's pretty gross. So obviously I am just removing all the goop that I can find. This is definitely an older knife. The corkscrew has a groove. This blade is pretty dull, so I don't have to worry too much about nicking myself with it on accident. But you definitely need to be careful. If your knife is really sharp, you could tape the blade if you're feeling worried about it, but I don't really think that's necessary here. So this is just a nylon bristled brush. If you don't have one of these that's kind of like this, a toothbrush would work just fine, or whatever you got around that is small enough to get down into some of those nooks and crannies and kind of clean up inside there a little bit. The movement on these is actually pretty good. You don't hear any grinding, which is nice, because if you've got grinding when you move them, that means you got like grit in there, and you'll have to work to get that out. So this is nice that it's not that bad. That is all of the dirt that I'm gonna get out of there. Everything else is either a little bit of corrosion, that's what's going on with those spacers. The aluminum there is corroded a little, or a little tiny bit of rust, which I think that right there might be a little bit of rust. So I will clean that up once it's dry with a little a leather strop. I'm gonna get rid of this water. I'll dry up my bench a little bit here. All right, so let's open everything up, dry it out. Let that sit for a little bit, let it get completely dry all up in there, and I will be back to do a little bit of oiling and polishing here once things are dry. One thing I do want to mention quick is when you're cleaning the scales, be careful that you don't pop the little silver emblem out. On these older scales with the solid backs, that's harder to do, but if you were to push right down that little hole right there, you could pop that emblem out. On newer scales, it might even be a little easier. There's a lot less material there, and you wouldn't have to go through as much. Like if you had a stiff bristled brush, you might accidentally pop that out. And then they're kind of tricky to get back in. So if you can avoid popping them out, that's probably better. Well, now that the knife has had a chance to dry, I'm gonna oil everything. So before I do that, I think I'm gonna close it all, and we'll talk about choice of oils. Now, if you read the Victorinox recommendations, they say to use their oil, which is all fine and dandy if you have it. And, you know, I'm sure it lasts a really long time because it doesn't take much oil for one of these knives, but I do not have their oil. And if I understand correctly, their oil is based on mineral oil anyway, and mineral oil is easy to find. You don't want to use a vegetable oil or something like that, because vegetable oils can spoil or harden, and that's not what you want. I would not use a gun oil or like 3-in-1 or anything like that, because those are not technically considered food safe oils. And if you're anything like me, once in a while you might use your knife to cut an apple or whatever. So you might as well use an oil that is food safe. So the oil of choice is mineral oil, and this is you can see it rolling around in there, just plain old mineral oil. I don't know if there's mineral oils that are not food grade, but this one I picked up in the pharmacy. I guess you can use them as a laxative. So I know that it's safe. If you were to ingest a little bit, it wouldn't be a big deal. So anyway, mineral oil, and you don't need much. This is more than enough oil to do multiple knives. When it comes to applying the oil, you can use whatever you got that's small enough to fit down in between the spacers. I've just got a Q-tip here that I cut the kind of squared off the end on with a knife. You could use a toothpick, you could use a dowel, you could use a pointy stick, you could use whatever. As long as it's small enough to fit down in here and kind of spread some of that oil around and pick a little bit up on it. I just used the Q-tip because I had it laying here. And sometimes you can use a little flattened bit of the Q-tip to kind of get in between the layers if you need to a little better. Get a little bit of oil, and this doesn't take much. This is probably way too much actually, but that's okay. It'll just kind of wipe off and come out as I go along. A bit of oil in there, a little bit of oil in there. So I just slipped a little bit in between each space. And then where you can see the bottom of the back spring, I try to get a little bit of oil down around that. So now the other thing I want to do on these back tools is I want to get in here, kind of down in that little bit right there. Oof. Without the oil in there, that's a real nail breaker. There we go. Now I'm just gonna go tool by tool, see how they do. This one can use a little right here. And then I'm just gonna work them back and forth, each individual tool. And that will help ensure that they have a little bit of oil everywhere. When you're doing the scissors, don't forget to give the scissors a little bit of oil. So I've got all the individual tools oiled at their hinges, and I did the scissors. Now I'm just going to let that sit for a little bit and maybe soak in a little, and then I will come back later and wipe off all the excess, and I'll also polish up the tool. The knife has sat for a bit and the oil's had a chance to kind of seep in. So now all I want to do is just go around with a towel and take whatever excess oil is on there off. I don't want to have my pockets get greasy or my hands every time I go to use the knife. And also, I suppose that'd make it hard to hang on to. So I'm just going to kind of open and close some tools and wipe out whatever excess oil is there. All right, so that's looking pretty good. The next thing I want to do is this is an older knife and you wouldn't need to do this on your knife, but I want to polish up these scales, the corrosion that's not on the scales, the corrosion that's on these spacers. It shouldn't be too hard to do. All I have here is just a leather strop. It's just a piece of leather on a flat piece of wood, and then it's got some polishing compound on there. We're just going to see if we can use that to kind of clean up some of these spots. Now, obviously, if you have a newer knife, you wouldn't have to do this. So be careful with the blades open, but we're going to try to clean this up a little bit. You could also use some really fine sandpaper, some wet dry. It would probably have a similar effect. A little more polishing compound on there. There we go. Now it feels much smoother. So let's close all these tools up. All right, now I'm ready to put the scales back on. And like I said, you wouldn't have to take the scales off if you were cleaning your knife and it wasn't that dirty, but this one was pretty grungy, and so I wanted to get in between the scales and clean up inside there. It's time to put the scales back on, and before you do that, you do want to make sure you got all the, I don't know, debris or any little fluffs of rag or anything out of there, because you don't want to pinch that in the scales. Now, I could buff the scales if I wanted to, but I'm not really all that concerned about it. So just make sure you got the right scale. The one with the cutout goes on this side with the corkscrew, obviously. And then sometimes you can snap them back in place by hand. There we go. Other times you might need to squeeze them like in a soft jawed vise or something like that. But this time it looks like I might be lucky enough to get them back in there without too much trouble. Let's see if this one will go on as easy. There is a direction to this. If you need, it does matter. You don't want to put it on the wrong way. It won't go on the wrong way. One side is a little bit narrower, and the bushing fits in only one direction. So you can kind of tell by looking at it upside down. It obviously won't fit on this way because there's nothing to line up with this hole. So you flip back around this way. There you go. Everything's going to line up. If you're looking at one of the newer scales, similar kind of look, obviously not going to go on this way. It's got to go this way. There we go. Now, obviously this is a very used knife. I don't mind that look, but it feels much better. The tools move much better. Now I just have to go reshape the blade a little bit and sharpen things up. But this guy is just about ready to use again. So there you go, how to clean and oil your Swiss Army knife. Thanks a bunch for watching. I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one.